The gunshot echoed across the dusty plains of Wyoming Territory as Willow Parker stumbled backward, her calloused hands fumbling with the frayed edges of her apron. She'd been hanging laundry when her uncle's temper finally erupted like a powder keg in the summer heat. At 20 years old, she'd endured his rages for far too long, ever since her parents had died of fever 5 years ago, leaving her at the mercy of her father's only brother, a man who saw her as nothing more than another mouth to feed on a failing homestead. "You ain't worth the scraps you eat," Vernon Parker bellowed, his whiskey-soaked breath visible even from where she stood. He'd fired his pistol into the air, sending the chickens scattering in panic across the yard. "Been thinking on it, girl. Tomorrow we're riding into Sweetwater, time you started earning your keep." Willow's throat tightened as she gathered the still damp sheets in her arms. "I already work from sunup till sundown, Uncle Vernon. The garden's producing better than last year, and I've mended every stitch of clothing." "Shut your mouth." Vernon spat on the ground between them. His eyes, bloodshot and mean, narrowed to slits. "Worthless females, always yammering. I got an arrangement with Jeb Miller over in the saloon. He's looking for new girls." The sheets slipped from Willow's grasp, landing in the dirt. "I won't work in a saloon." Vernon's laughter held no humor. "Ain't asking, girl. Either that or I'll find another use for you." He scratched his grimy beard. "Heard tell of a horse trader coming through, fine Morgan stallion, worth more than this whole sorry patch of land." Willow stood frozen, the implications of his words seeping through her like icy water. Her uncle had never been a kind man, but she hadn't believed he would sink so low. The prospect of being sold like livestock made her stomach clench. That night, she lay awake on her thin mattress in the loft, planning her escape. Beyond the homestead lay miles of open country, dotted with small settlements and ranches. She'd heard whispers of a prosperous cattle ranch to the north, the Lazy S, owned by a man named Samuel Yates. Folks said he was fair to his hands and kept to himself. The ranch was at least a 2-day walk, but it was her best chance. Before dawn broke, Willow slipped from the house with nothing but a small bundle of possessions, her mother's silver locket around her neck, and the meager savings she'd hidden beneath a loose floorboard, $3.42. She'd managed only a mile's distance when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast behind her. "Thought you'd run, did you?" Vernon's voice boomed as he circled her on his aging mare. "Ungrateful little thief." He dismounted heavily, lurching toward her with a rope in his hands. "I'm not a thief," Willow said, backing away, "and I'm not your property to sell." "You're whatever I say you are," Vernon growled, lunging for her arm. "Been feeding and housing you for 5 years. Time to collect what you owe." Willow ducked away, but the toe of her boot caught on a rock, sending her sprawling into the dirt. Vernon was on her in an instant, binding her wrists despite her struggles. He hauled her up and threw her across his saddle like a sack of grain. "Let me go," she cried, twisting against the ropes that bit into her flesh. "Shut up before I gag you too," Vernon threatened, mounting behind her. "We're meeting that horse trader at noon. By sundown I'll have my stallion and be rid of you for good." The ride into Sweetwater was agony, each step of the horse jostling Willow's awkward position. Her uncle had loosened the ropes enough to move her to a sitting position, but kept a firm grip on her bound hands. The town appeared on the horizon, a collection of wooden buildings shimmering in the heat. Sweetwater was bustling that spring morning of 1878. Cowboys fresh from the trail with pockets full of wages mingled with settlers and merchants. Willow felt the stares as Vernon led his horse down the main street, her tear-streaked face and bound wrists drawing curious and concerned looks. But no one intervened, not in a territory where the law was often whatever the strongest man declared it to be. Vernon reined in outside the Rusty Spur Saloon, roughly pulling Willow from the saddle. "Stand up straight," he hissed, adjusting her bonnet to hide the bruise forming on her cheek. "Don't want damaged goods, does he?" "Please," Willow whispered, one last attempt at reaching whatever humanity might remain in him. "I'm your brother's daughter." "My brother was a fool who married beneath him and died leaving me with his burden," Vernon replied coldly. "Consider this your inheritance." Inside the saloon, the air hung heavy with tobacco smoke and stale whiskey. Despite the early hour, several tables were occupied by card players and drinkers. A piano player lazily tapped out a tune in the corner while a barmaid with tired eyes delivered mugs of beer. "Vernon Parker," a gruff voice called from a corner table. "Right on time." Willow's gaze fell upon a weather-beaten man with a scar slicing through his left eyebrow. He wasn't the horse trader, she realized with growing dread. This was Jeb Miller, the saloon owner her uncle had mentioned. "Jeb," Vernon nodded, shoving Willow forward. "Changed my plans. Met a fellow offering a Morgan stallion for the right trade. Thought I'd see what you'd give me for her before I finalize that deal." Jeb circled Willow like a vulture, assessing her with cold calculation. "She's pretty enough." "Bit skinny, can she cook, clean, does all that and more," Vernon replied. "Raised her myself after my brother passed." $15, Jeb offered. 25, Vernon countered. "She's untouched, worth more." Willow trembled with rage and fear as they haggled over her as if she were a piece of furniture. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for anyone who might help, but the few patrons averted their gazes. 20, Jeb said finally. "And that's my final offer," Vernon frowned. "Horse traders offering a stallion worth 50 at least, unless you can beat that." "Where is this horse trader?" Jeb asked suspiciously. "Meeting him at the livery at noon," Vernon replied. "Fine Morgan stallion, 4 years old." The saloon doors swung open, momentarily flooding the dim interior with sunlight. A tall figure stood silhouetted against the brightness before stepping inside. The newcomer moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to commanding respect. His spurs jangled softly with each step, and the Colt revolver at his hip looked well used but meticulously maintained. "Speak of the devil," Vernon muttered, recognition flashing across his face. "That's him now." Willow watched as the stranger approached, getting her first clear look at him. He was younger than she'd expected for a successful horse trader, perhaps 30, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His dark hair was cut shorter than most men wore it, and he was clean-shaven save for a slight shadow along his jaw. "Mr. Parker," the man greeted Vernon with a curt nod before his gaze shifted to Willow, lingering on her bound wrists. Something dangerous flickered in his expression. "I see you've brought what you're offering to trade." "This here's my niece," Vernon said, attempting a jovial tone that fell flat. "Told you she's a good worker, strong, healthy, make a fine addition to your household." The stranger's face remained impassive, but Willow noticed his hand drift closer to his pistol. "I breed horses, Parker, not people." "Now listen, Yates," Vernon began, and Willow's heart skipped a beat at the name. This was Samuel Yates of the Lazy S Ranch, the very man she'd been planning to seek out. "We had an arrangement. Your Morgan stallion for my niece. Fair trade." Samuel Yates's expression hardened. "I recall discussing a horse trade. You mentioned having a valuable offering. I assumed livestock or land. A woman's more valuable than either," Vernon insisted. "Especially one who can cook, clean, and warm a man's bed, you being unmarried and all." "Enough." The single word cut through the saloon like a whip crack. Every head turned toward them now, the piano player's fingers stilling on the keys. "I don't trade in human lives, Parker." "And if I did?" Yates's eyes met Willow's for a moment, something unreadable passing between them. "She's worth more than my entire herd." Vernon's face contorted with rage. "You agreed to the trade?" "I agreed to hear your offer," Yates corrected coldly, "and now I'm declining it." He turned to Willow. "Miss, are you here of your own free will?" Before she could answer, Vernon grabbed her arm roughly. "She's my kin under my protection. What happens to her is my business." In a movement almost too quick to follow, Yates had drawn his pistol and leveled it at Vernon's chest. "Remove your hand from the lady and untie her. Now." The saloon fell completely silent. Jeb Miller had edged away, clearly wanting no part in the confrontation. Vernon's face paled, but his grip on Willow only tightened. "This ain't your concern," he blustered, though fear had crept into his voice. The law says she's a free woman, not property," Yates interrupted. "Sheriff Callahan might be 3 days' ride checking on the Miller homestead, but he'll be mighty interested to hear about this when he returns." His voice lowered, steel beneath the quiet words. "Now untie her before I forget my manners." For a tense moment, Willow thought her uncle might draw his own weapon. Instead, with shaking fingers, he loosened the ropes around her wrists. The moment she was free, Willow stepped away from Vernon, rubbing circulation back into her chafed skin. "Thank you, Mr. Yates," she said softly. "Samuel," he corrected, his eyes never leaving Vernon. Miss Parker, I'd be honored to escort you wherever you wish to go. She's going nowhere, Vernon snarled, reaching for her again. She's my brother's child, and the law recognizes her as an adult, Samuel cut in. Unless I'm mistaken, Miss Parker appears to be over 18. I'm 20, Willow confirmed, finding strength in the stranger's unwavering support, and I refuse to return to my uncle's homestead. Vernon's face flushed purple with rage. You ungrateful, choose your next words carefully, Samuel warned, his pistol still steady, very carefully. Something in his tone must have finally penetrated Vernon's alcohol-addled mind. He took a step back, hands raised. Fine, take the worthless girl. But don't come crying when she steals you blind and runs off. Parker women have always been trouble. I'll take my chances, Samuel replied evenly, finally holstering his weapon. He turned to Willow. My wagon's outside if you'd care to join me. Willow hesitated only briefly. This man was a stranger, but he'd intervened when no one else would, and if the tales of the Lazy S were true, she might find honest work there. I accept your offer, Mr. Yates. Samuel, he corrected again, offering his arm with unexpected gentility. As they turned to leave, Vernon called after them, This ain't over, Yates. That girl belongs with her family. Samuel paused at the door, looking back over his shoulder. Family doesn't sell family, Parker, remember that. To Willow, he murmured, Don't worry, he won't follow us. Outside in the bright sunlight, Willow blinked back tears of relief and lingering fear. True to his word, Samuel had a wagon loaded with supplies parked in front of the general store. I meant what I said, Miss Parker, he told her as he helped her onto the wagon seat. I'll take you wherever you wish to go, the stage depot if you're looking to leave Wyoming. Or, he hesitated, there's honest work at my ranch for someone willing to cook and help with household matters. My previous housekeeper returned east to care for her ailing mother. Willow studied him carefully. There was nothing in his manner that suggested ulterior motives, yet caution born of hard experience made her wary. Why would you help me, Mr. Yates? You don't know me. Samuel climbed up beside her, taking the reins. Samuel, please, and I know enough. I know what it's like to be at the mercy of those who should protect you. Something darkened in his expression. No one deserves to be treated as property. My uncle, he's a desperate man. The drought last year nearly ruined him. Desperation explains many things, but excuses nothing, Samuel replied, his voice gentle despite the firmness of his words. What he attempted today was unconscionable. Willow nodded slowly. I was actually heading toward your ranch when he caught me. I'd heard you might need workers. A ghost of a smile touched Samuel's lips. Then it seems Providence has brought us together, Miss Parker. Willow, she offered, if I'm to call you Samuel. Willow, he repeated, as if testing the name, it suits you, resilient yet graceful. She felt heat rise to her cheeks at the unexpected compliment. Thank you for what you did back there. Not many men would have interfered. Not many men worthy of the name would have stood by, he corrected, clicking to the horses. The wagon lurched forward, heading north out of town. The Lazy S is about 4 hours' ride. We'll stop to rest the horses halfway. As they left Sweetwater behind, Willow felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Whatever awaited her at the Lazy S ranch, it had to be better than what she'd escaped. And the man beside her, his profile strong against the vast Wyoming sky, had already proven himself more honorable than most. What she couldn't know then was how completely Samuel Yates would transform her life, or how soon she would transform his. The journey to the Lazy S ranch passed in companionable conversation. Samuel proved to be thoughtful and articulate, asking Willow about her life before her parents' passing without prying into painful memories. She learned he'd built his ranch from almost nothing over the past 8 years, starting with just a dozen cattle and 2 good horses. My father was a horse trader back east, he explained as they stopped to water the horses at a clear running creek. Taught me everything about evaluating bloodlines and temperament. When he died, I headed west with what little inheritance wasn't claimed by creditors. Is that why you were in Sweetwater? Willow asked. To trade horses, Samuel nodded, helping her down from the wagon. I've developed a reputation for breeding solid cow ponies and a few finer riding horses. Your uncle approached me yesterday, claiming he had something valuable to trade for my best Morgan. I never imagined he meant a person. His jaw tightened at the memory. He wasn't always like this, Willow said softly, kneeling by the creek to splash cool water on her face. After my parents died, something changed in him. The drinking got worse, and then the drought came. She trailed off, unwilling to make excuses for inexcusable behavior. Hardship reveals character more than it creates it, Samuel observed, offering her a clean handkerchief. Your uncle's actions were his choice, not your burden. Willow accepted the handkerchief with a grateful smile. You're very philosophical for a rancher. My mother insisted I receive an education before I learned to rope cattle, he replied with a slight smile. She'd have preferred I become a lawyer or doctor, but horses were always in my blood. They continued northward after their brief rest, the landscape gradually shifting from flat plains to rolling hills dotted with pine and aspen groves. By late afternoon, Samuel pointed to a distant cluster of buildings nestled in a verdant valley. The Lazy S, he announced with undisguised pride. Not the biggest spread in Wyoming, but it's growing every year. As they drew closer, Willow could see a substantial main house built of hewn logs, a large barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Several corrals held horses of different colors and builds, and beyond them cattle grazed on lush spring grass. Men on horseback moved among the herds, their distant figures testament to the ranch's prosperity. It's beautiful, Willow breathed, taking in the peaceful scene. After years on her uncle's failing homestead, the well-maintained ranch seemed almost like a vision from a dream. It's home, Samuel said simply, guiding the wagon toward the main house. Mrs. Hawkins from town comes twice weekly to help with cleaning, but between those times, the place falls into disarray. 6 ranch hands take their meals here, and I've never mastered the art of cooking anything beyond basic beans and bacon. Willow straightened her shoulders. Here was something she could do well. I'm an excellent cook, Mr. Yates Samuel. My mother taught me from childhood. Then you've already earned your keep, he replied with a genuine smile. The men will be grateful for something that doesn't taste like leather. As they pulled up to the house, a weathered man with graying temples emerged from the barn, eyeing Willow curiously. Thomas, Samuel called, setting the brake on the wagon. This is Miss Willow Parker. She'll be taking over household duties. Thomas nodded respectfully. Madam. Good to have you here. The boys have been complaining about the bosses cooking something fierce. Samuel helped Willow down from the wagon. Thomas Cooper is my foreman, been with me since I first staked my claim here. Pleased to meet you, Mr. Cooper, Willow said. Just Thomas, madam. We don't stand on ceremony much out here, Samuel gestured toward the house. Let me show you around. You must be tired after everything that's happened today. The main house was larger than it appeared from outside, with a spacious kitchen, dining room, and sitting area on the ground floor and several bedrooms upstairs. The furnishings were sturdy rather than elegant, but everything was of good quality. This would be your room, Samuel said, opening a door to a pleasant chamber with windows facing east. The previous housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, kept it tidy before she left. The room was simply furnished with a bed, wardrobe, washstand, and small writing desk, but to Willow, accustomed to sleeping in a drafty loft, it seemed luxurious. It's lovely, she said sincerely, and far more than I expected. The men bunk separately, Samuel explained. I believe in maintaining proprieties, especially for a young woman under my roof. Your privacy and reputation will be respected here. Relief washed over Willow. Despite his kindness, a lingering fear had remained that Samuel might expect something inappropriate in exchange for his help. His words reassured her that her instincts about his character had been correct. Thank you, she said simply. For everything, Samuel nodded, seeming almost embarrassed by her gratitude. Get settled in. Dinner is usually at 6, but after today's events, a simple meal will suffice. The pantry is well stocked. Mrs. Finch saw to that before she left. Left alone, Willow unpacked her meager belongings, fighting back unexpected tears. In the space of a single day, her life had transformed completely. She had escaped a terrible fate and found herself in surroundings more comfortable than any she'd known since her parents' deaths. After washing away the dust of travel, she made her way to the kitchen to prepare dinner. The space was well organized, with a large cast iron stove, ample work surfaces, and a pantry filled with staples. Willow set to work, finding purpose in the familiar tasks of cooking. By 6 o'clock, She had prepared a hearty beef stew, fresh bread from dough Mrs. Finch had left rising, and an apple cobbler made from preserved fruit. The ranch hands filed in, washing up outside before entering the dining room. Their appreciative comments as they tasted her cooking brought a flush of pride to Willow's cheeks. Samuel caught her eye across the table, giving her a small nod of approval that warmed her more than seemed reasonable. She reminded herself not to read too much into his kindness. He was her employer now, not a potential suitor. After the day's ordeal, the last thing she needed was to develop foolish romantic notions about the man who had rescued her. Yet as the evening progressed, Willow couldn't help noticing how the ranch hands respected Samuel, speaking to him with easy familiarity while still acknowledging his authority. He knew each man's story and family situation, inquiring after sick relatives or offering advice on personal matters. This was no harsh taskmaster, but a leader who earned loyalty through fairness and genuine concern. After dinner, the men thanked Willow profusely before returning to the bunkhouse, leaving her alone with Samuel in the comfortable sitting room. A small fire warded off the spring evening's chill as they sat in companionable silence. "They liked your cooking," Samuel remarked, breaking the quiet. "Thomas said it's the first time he's seen Hank Fisher clean his plate since Christmas." Willow smiled, pleased by the compliment. "I enjoy cooking. It gives me satisfaction to see people well fed. A valuable quality." Samuel hesitated, then added, "I should explain your duties more clearly. I expect you to cook meals, keep the house in order, and manage the laundry. Sundays are yours to rest or attend church in town if you wish. You'll receive $10 monthly with room and board provided." "That's very generous," Willow replied, genuinely surprised. It was more than twice what most housekeepers earned in the territory. "It's fair compensation for honest work," Samuel countered. "I don't believe in exploiting those who labor for me." He paused, studying her with those perceptive gray eyes. "May I ask something personal, Miss Parker?" "Willow, please. And yes, you may." "How did you come to be in your uncle's care? You mentioned your parents passed away." Willow's hands twisted in her lap. "They died of typhoid 5 years ago. Our farm was small but prosperous enough near Cheyenne. When they fell ill, it happened so quickly, first mother, then father just 3 days later." The memories still pained her, but the sharp edge of grief had dulled with time. "Uncle Vernon was my only living relative. He sold our farm, supposedly to pay my parents' debts, though I later suspected there were few if any debts to settle." Samuel's expression darkened. "So he profited from your tragedy, then treated you as a burden." "Yes," Willow admitted, "though I tried to earn my keep. The drought last year hit his homestead hard, the drinking got worse, and then—" She trailed off, unwilling to relive that morning's events. "You need never fear such treatment here," Samuel assured her quietly. "Your position is secure as long as you wish to remain, and you're free to leave whenever you choose." "Thank you," Willow said, touched by his understanding. "I don't intend to abuse your kindness. I'll work hard to earn my place here." Samuel's smile reached his eyes, creating fine lines at the corners. "I have no doubt of that, Willow Parker." As she bid him goodnight and climbed the stairs to her new room, Willow found herself reflecting on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. From the brink of being sold like chattel to having her own room in a prosperous ranch house, all because Samuel Yates had recognized her humanity when her own blood kin had not. Despite her determination to maintain proper distance, she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest when he smiled at her. It was gratitude, she told herself firmly, nothing more. A woman in her position couldn't afford romantic fancies, especially about a man like Samuel Yates, a man whose kindness already placed her in his debt. Yet as she drifted off to sleep in the comfortable bed, her last thought was of storm-gray eyes and a quiet voice declaring she was worth more than an entire herd of horses. The weeks that followed established a rhythm to Willow's new life at the Lazy S. She rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Samuel and the ranch hands, spent her mornings cleaning and organizing the house, and her afternoons baking or tending to the kitchen garden she'd started behind the house. The work was substantial but satisfying, and for the first time in years, she felt her contributions were appreciated. Samuel was often away during daylight hours, riding out with his men to check cattle, train horses, or handle the myriad responsibilities of a growing ranch. but evenings found them sharing the dinner table with the hands, and afterward, increasingly often, conversing alone in the sitting room. These quiet hours became precious to Willow, though she tried to guard her heart against growing too fond of her employer. One evening in late May, nearly a month after her arrival, Samuel returned from town with a package for her. The new dry goods shipment arrived, he explained, somewhat awkwardly handing her the brown paper parcel. I noticed your dresses are, well, I thought you might like some new fabric. Willow untied the string with trembling fingers. Inside lay 3 lengths of beautiful cotton fabric, one in soft blue, another in warm yellow, and a third in a pretty floral print. There was also a packet of needles, several spools of thread, and delicate pearl buttons. This is too generous, she protested, though her fingers caressed the fabrics longingly. Her current dresses were patched and faded, having served her for years on her uncle's homestead. Consider it a business expense, Samuel replied, clearly uncomfortable with her gratitude. My housekeeper should be properly attired, and you've saved me money already with your careful management of the household accounts. Willow recognized his attempt to frame the gift as practical rather than personal, but the thoughtfulness behind it touched her deeply. Thank you, Samuel. I'll start sewing tomorrow. He nodded, seeming relieved she'd accepted. I've also invited the neighboring ranchers for dinner next Saturday, nothing formal, just a neighborly gathering, the Marshalls to the east and the Andersons from the South Ridge. They bring news and gossip from their parts of the territory. I'll prepare something special, Willow promised, already planning the menu in her mind. The Marshalls have a daughter about your age, Samuel added casually. Rebecca, thought you might appreciate some female company. The consideration in this small gesture, recognizing she might be lonely for feminine companionship, nearly undid Willow's composure. That would be lovely, she managed to say evenly, though her heart swelled with an emotion she dared not name. The dinner party proved a success. Rebecca Marshall was indeed close to Willow's age and equally starved for female friendship in the isolated ranching community. The 2 young women formed an immediate connection, exchanging promises to visit each other when duties permitted. Your housekeeper is charming, Yates, Henry Marshall commented as the evening drew to a close. Fine cook, too. You're fortunate to have found her. Yes, Samuel agreed, his eyes meeting Willow's across the room. I am. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the house was quiet, Willow sat on the porch, enjoying the cool evening air. The vastness of the star-filled Wyoming sky never failed to humble her, a blanket of diamonds spread across infinite darkness. Beautiful night, Samuel's voice came from behind her. He stepped onto the porch, 2 cups of coffee in hand. Thought you might like this. Willow accepted the cup gratefully. Thank you, and thank you for introducing me to Rebecca. It's been a long time since I had a friend my own age. Samuel settled into the chair beside her. I noticed, a young woman needs companions beyond an old rancher and his dusty crew. You're hardly old, Willow replied with a smile. How old are you, if I may ask? 32 last February, he admitted. Old enough to know better about most things, young enough to still make plenty of mistakes. And what mistakes have you made lately, Samuel Yates? She asked, surprising herself with the teasing tone. He looked at her directly, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. None I'm prepared to confess just yet. The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken possibilities. Willow broke the silence first, her voice slightly unsteady. The Marshalls mentioned a summer social at their ranch next month, a dance for the community. Yes, they hold one every year, Samuel replied. Good for morale before the fall roundup. You should attend. Will you? She asked, immediately wishing she could retract the too eager question. Samuel sipped his coffee before answering. I generally make an appearance. Not much of a dancer, though. I haven't danced since before my parents died, Willow admitted softly. I used to love it. Something in her tone must have affected him, for Samuel set down his cup and turned to face her more directly. Then you must dance again, Willow Parker. Life's simple joys shouldn't be forgotten. Their conversation drifted to other topics: the promising condition of the cattle, Thomas's upcoming trip to Denver, the vegetables thriving in Willow's garden. Yet something had shifted between them, a current of awareness that hadn't been there before. When Willow finally rose to go inside, Samuel stood as well, their bodies unexpectedly close in the narrow porch space. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought he might reach for her hand, or even the notion sent heat flooding her cheeks kiss her. Instead, he stepped back, giving her room to pass. "Good night, Willow," he said quietly. "Thank you for making the Lazy S feel more like a home than it has in years." "Good night, Samuel," she replied, unable to meet his gaze for fear he would read the longing in her eyes. "Thank you for giving me a home when I needed one most." Inside her room, Willow pressed cool hands to her flushed cheeks. This wouldn't do. Developing feelings for Samuel could jeopardize everything. He was her employer, her rescuer, perhaps becoming her friend. But anything more would be improper, especially given her precarious position. If her growing affection made him uncomfortable, she might lose not only her position but the sanctuary she'd found at the Lazy S. Yet as she prepared for bed, Willow couldn't banish the memory of his voice in the saloon that day, "She's worth more than my entire herd," or the way his eyes had sought hers across the dinner table tonight. Foolish or not, something was blooming in her heart that would not be easily uprooted. The June morning of the Marshals' dance dawned clear and promising. Willow had finished her blue dress the previous evening, adding delicate white embroidery at the collar and cuffs. It was the finest garment she'd owned since her parents' deaths, and she couldn't help admiring her reflection in the small mirror above her washstand. She'd arranged to ride to the social with Rebecca and her parents, who would stop by the Lazy S on their way. Samuel had business in town that morning but promised to arrive at the dance later. As Willow descended the stairs in her new dress, she found Thomas waiting in the front room. "Miss Parker," he greeted her with a respectful nod. "The boss asked me to give you this before you leave." He handed her a small package wrapped in tissue paper. Inside, Willow found a delicate silver hairpin adorned with a tiny pearl. A small note in Samuel's precise handwriting read simply, "Every lady deserves something pretty for a dance. S.Y. Is something wrong, Miss Parker?" Thomas asked, concerned by her sudden stillness. "No," Willow managed, carefully pinning the ornament into her upswept hair. "Nothing's wrong at all." The Marshall Ranch was larger than the Lazy S, with a sprawling main house and extensive outbuildings. For the social, they had cleared the barn of hay and equipment, strung colorful lanterns from the rafters, and set up tables laden with food and drink along one wall. A fiddler, banjo player, and accordion player provided lively music from a corner platform. Rebecca greeted Willow warmly, introducing her to other young women from nearby homesteads and ranches. Though initially shy, Willow soon found herself enjoying the company and the festive atmosphere. Several young men asked her to dance, and she accepted politely, remembering steps she hadn't practiced in years. The evening progressed pleasantly, but Willow found herself repeatedly glancing toward the barn entrance, watching for Samuel's arrival. When he finally appeared, her heart performed a peculiar little skip. He dressed with care in a crisp white shirt, dark vest, and clean denims, his hair still damp from washing. Several women noted his entrance with appreciative glances, reminding Willow that Samuel Yates was considered one of the territory's most eligible bachelors. He spotted her almost immediately, making his way through the crowd with determined strides. "Miss Parker," he greeted her formally, mindful of the public setting. "You look lovely." "Thank you," she replied, equally proper. "And thank you for the hairpin, it's beautiful." "It suits you," he said simply, his eyes lingering on her face a moment too long for mere politeness. "Are you enjoying yourself?" "Very much," Willow assured him. "Everyone has been welcoming." Samuel nodded, seeming pleased. "Good. I was concerned," he broke off as the musicians began a new tune. "Would you honor me with this dance?" Willow placed her hand in his outstretched palm, trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach at his touch. "I thought you weren't much of a dancer." "I'm not," he admitted as he led her to the floor, "but some things are worth the embarrassment of trying." The dance was a simple waltz, for which Willow was grateful. Samuel proved more competent than he'd claimed, guiding her with a firm hand at her waist and respectful distance between their bodies. Yet even that proper touch sent awareness coursing through her. "I heard news in town today," Samuel said as they circled the floor. "Your uncle has left the territory, sold his homestead to the Millers, and headed for California." Willow nearly missed a step. "Truly, he's gone," Samuel nodded, "according to Sheriff Callahan, who returned last week. Vernon Parker left 2 days after our Encounter in Sweetwater. The sheriff was quite interested in my account of events. Relief washed over Willow. She hadn't realized how the fear of her uncle's reappearance had lingered at the edges of her consciousness. So I'm truly free of him. You always were, Samuel replied gently. But yes, he won't trouble you again. As the music ended, Samuel reluctantly released her. I should greet Henry Marshall. Save another dance for me, of course, Willow agreed, watching him move through the crowd with a curious mixture of emotions. Relief at her uncle's departure mingled with something deeper and more complex feelings for Samuel that had grown beyond gratitude into genuine affection, perhaps even love. The realization should have alarmed her. Instead, it settled into her heart with surprising rightness, as if acknowledging a truth long known but unspoken. Later, as the evening cooled and stars appeared in the darkening sky, Samuel found her again. Would you care for some air? He asked, offering his arm. The garden behind the house is quite pleasant. Willow nodded, taking his arm. Several couples had already sought the relative privacy of the garden, strolling along illuminated paths or sitting on benches placed strategically among flowering shrubs. Samuel led her to a quiet corner where a wooden swing hung from the branch of an ancient cottonwood. You've been quiet tonight, he observed, as they sat side by side on the swing. Is something troubling you? Willow considered deflecting the question but found herself answering honestly. I've been thinking about how much my life has changed since that day in Sweetwater. Sometimes it hardly seems real. Samuel's hand covered hers where it rested on the swing between them. It's real, Willow. You've built this new life through your own strength and determination. With help, she added softly. I've never properly thanked you, Samuel, not just for intervening that day, but for everything since. You've been more than fair, more than kind. Kindness had little to do with it, he replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper. At least, not after the first day. Willow turned to face him, her pulse quickening at his expression. What do you mean? Samuel's fingers tightened around hers. I mean that offering you a position at the Lazy S began as kindness, perhaps. But asking you to stay, wanting you to stay, that came from somewhere else entirely. The distant music from the barn seemed to fade as Willow focused entirely on the man beside her, on the warmth of his hand covering hers, on the intensity in his storm-gray eyes. Samuel, she began, uncertain what she meant to say. I know it's too soon, he interrupted, misreading her hesitation. You've only just escaped one man who saw you as property. The last thing you need is another making claims on your future. Is that what you're doing? Willow asked, surprised to find herself smiling. Making claims? Samuel looked momentarily disconcerted. I know, of course not. I only meant to say that I've grown to care for you, Willow, more than is appropriate for an employer. If that makes you uncomfortable, I understand completely, and your position at the ranch remains secure regardless. And if it doesn't make me uncomfortable? Willow asked, emboldened by the vulnerability in his usually confident demeanor. If I've developed similar feelings. Hope flashed across Samuel's face. Have you? Instead of answering directly, Willow reached up to touch his cheek, a gesture of tenderness she'd imagined but never dared attempt. The day we met, you said I was worth more than your entire herd. No one had ever valued me like that before. I meant it, Samuel said quietly. Though I had no right to speak for your worth then, I hardly knew you. And now I know you're worth far more than horses or cattle or land, he replied, his hand coming up to cover hers against his face. You're brave and kind and stronger than you realize. You've brought light back to a house that was merely shelter before. Willow's eyes filled with unexpected tears. No one has ever seen me so clearly. I see you, Willow Parker, Samuel murmured, leaning closer. And I would very much like to court you properly if you'll allow it. Her heart soared at his words. I would like that very much, Samuel Yates. The kiss that followed was gentle and brief, a promise rather than a passion, but it sealed something profound between them. When they parted, Samuel kept her hand in his thumb tracing circles on her palm. We should return to the dance, he said reluctantly. Before tongues start wagging, Willow nodded, though she was reluctant to break this perfect moment. As they rose to leave, Samuel stopped her with a gentle tug on her hand. I want to do this right, Willow, he said earnestly. You deserve to be courted with respect and patience. I won't rush you. Thank you, she replied, touched by his consideration. But Samuel, I know my own mind and heart. I may have been rushed into many things in my life, but my feelings for you aren't among them." His smile then was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, full of promise and light. Hand in hand, they returned to the barn, where the dancing continued under the glow of lanterns and watchful eyes. Word spread quickly through the small community that Samuel Yates was courting his housekeeper. Some tongues wagged, as they inevitably would, but most received the news with approval. Samuel's reputation for fairness and integrity was well established, and Willow had made a favorable impression on neighbors during her months at the Lazy S. Summer unfurled across the Wyoming landscape, bringing long days of sunshine and occasional violent thunderstorms that swept down from the mountains. Samuel's courtship proceeded with the same careful attention he gave to all important matters. There were picnics by the creek that bordered the ranch, Sunday drives in his polished buggy, and evenings on the porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in spectacular colors. Through it all, Willow continued her duties at the ranch, insisting that their personal relationship shouldn't interfere with her work. But the nature of their interactions inevitably shifted. Their conversations deepened, touching on hopes and fears, memories and dreams. Samuel spoke of his difficult relationship with his father, a harsh man who had valued horses above family. Willow shared stories of her parents' loving marriage and the happy childhood that had ended too abruptly with their deaths. One evening in late July, they rode to a ridge overlooking the valley where the Lazy S sprawled below them. The setting sun bathed everything in golden light, turning the meandering creek into a ribbon of fire and the pastures into fields of gold. "I came here the day I bought this land," Samuel told her as they sat side by side on a blanket he'd spread on the grass. "Sat right here and tried to imagine what it could become." "You've built something remarkable," Willow said, admiring the neat buildings and healthy herds visible in the distance. "It's still growing," Samuel replied. "Next year I plan to expand the eastern pasture, maybe build a proper house to replace the cabin." Willow glanced at him. "What's wrong with the current house? I think it's lovely." "It's served its purpose," Samuel acknowledged, "but I've been thinking lately that a family might need more room." Her heart skipped at the word family, but she kept her voice casual, planning to hire married hands. Samuel turned to face her directly, taking both her hands in his. "Willow Parker, I believe you know exactly what I'm planning." She did, but the moment felt too important for assumptions. "Tell me anyway." "I'm planning hoping to marry a remarkable woman who once escaped being traded for a horse," he said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth despite the seriousness in his eyes. "If she'll have me." Joy bubbled up inside Willow, but she managed to maintain a thoughtful expression. "That seems a sensible plan, though I wonder if this woman might prefer being asked directly." Samuel laughed softly, "Always keeping me honest." He shifted to one knee, still holding her hands. "Willow Parker, these past months have shown me what I was missing in my life. Not just a housekeeper, but a partner, someone to share both burdens and joys. I love you, your strength, your kindness, your quiet dignity. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Tears blurred Willow's vision as she nodded. "Yes, Samuel, yes, I will." He gathered her into his arms, kissing her with all the restrained passion of their months of courtship. When they finally separated, both breathless, Samuel pressed his forehead to hers. "I promise you'll never regret this, Willow. I'll spend my life making sure of it." "I know," she said simply, believing it with her whole heart. "I've never been more certain of anything." They were married in early September, before the fall roundup began in earnest. The ceremony took place on the Lazy S, with Thomas serving as Samuel's best man and Rebecca as Willow's maid of honor. Neighbors from miles around attended, bringing gifts and well wishes for the couple who had become respected fixtures in the community. As Willow spoke her vows beneath an arch of late-blooming wildflowers, she marveled at the journey that had brought her here. From the desperate young woman fleeing her uncle's homestead to the bride of a man who valued her beyond measure, it seemed almost like a tale from the dime novels Rebecca sometimes shared with her. The wedding celebration continued well into the evening, with dancing in the yard under strings of lanterns. As darkness fell, Samuel led his bride away from the festivities toward their home, now truly theirs together. "I have something for you," he said when they reached the porch. From his pocket, he withdrew a small wooden box. "A wedding gift." Inside lay a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. When Willow opened it, she found a tiny portrait of her parents on one side, a miniature painted from the daguerreotype she kept in her mother's Bible. "Samuel," she whispered, overcome with emotion. "How did you?" "Rebecca's father knows an artist in Cheyenne," he explained. "I sent him the photograph months ago, asked him to create something you could keep close to your heart." Willow cradled the precious gift in her palm. "It's the most thoughtful present I've ever received." Samuel fastened the chain around her neck, his fingers brushing the sensitive skin at her nape. "Your parents would be proud of the woman you've become, Willow. I wish I could have known them." "They would have loved you," she assured him, reaching up to touch his face. "Almost as much as I do." His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer. "Are you ready to begin our life together, Mrs. Yates?" Willow smiled at her new name, at the promise it held. "I believe we already have, Mr. Yates. This is just the next chapter." With that, Samuel swept her into his arms and carried her across the threshold of their home into the future they would build together. 5 years later, Willow stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching Samuel teach their 4-year-old son William to ride his first pony. Their 2-year-old daughter Sarah sat on her hip, babbling happily as she pointed at her brother and father. "Papa," Sarah called, waving her chubby hand. "Pony." "That's right, sweetheart," Willow agreed. "Papa's showing Will how to ride the pony." The Lazy S had prospered beyond even Samuel's ambitious dreams. They'd added 1,000 acres to the original property, built a larger main house while converting the old one to guest quarters, and established one of the territory's most respected horse breeding programs. Samuel had recently been appointed to the Territorial Livestock Commission, a position of considerable influence as Wyoming moved toward statehood. Thomas Cooper had married Rebecca Marshall 2 years earlier, and they'd built a small house on the eastern edge of the ranch. Thomas now managed much of the daily operation, allowing Samuel more time with his growing family. "Mama, look," Will called as he completed a circuit of the corral on his gentle pony. "I'm riding by myself." "Wonderful, darling," Willow called back, her heart swelling with pride and love. Samuel walked alongside the pony, one hand hovering near the saddle, ready to steady his son if needed. The tenderness in his expression as he guided Will brought tears to Willow's eyes. The sound of approaching horses drew her attention to the road. A wagon was coming up the lane, driven by a man she didn't recognize. Beside him sat a woman hunched in apparent exhaustion or illness. Samuel noticed the visitors too, lifting Will from the pony and instructing him to take his sister inside. As the children obeyed, Samuel joined Willow on the porch, his hand coming to rest protectively at the small of her back. "Do you know them?" Willow asked quietly as the wagon drew closer. "No," Samuel replied, equally low. "Stay here while I see what they want." He stepped forward as the wagon halted in the yard. "Can I help you folks?" The driver, a weathered man in his 50s, nodded wearily. "Hope so, mister. Name's Garner. This here's my wife. She's taken poorly and we're looking for a place to rest a spell." Someone in town said the Lazy S might have room for travelers. Samuel glanced at the woman, whose face was drawn with fatigue. "We do have guest quarters. Your wife looks like she could use rest and a hot meal." "Much obliged," Garner said, climbing down stiffly. "Been on the road from Colorado 2 weeks now, heading to Montana to join our son." As Samuel helped Mrs. Garner from the wagon, Willow noticed how pale and thin she appeared. "Please come inside," she invited, maternal instinct overriding caution. "I'll make some tea while you rest." The Garners accepted their hospitality gratefully. While Samuel showed Mr. Garner where to stable their tired horses, Willow settled Mrs. Garner in the guest quarters with tea and bread fresh from the oven. "You're very kind," the older woman said, her hands trembling slightly as she held the cup. "Most folks wouldn't take in strangers like this." "We've been blessed," Willow replied simply. "It's right to share those blessings when we can." Mrs. Garner studied her curiously. "You weren't always comfortable, though, were you? There's something in your eyes, you know what it's like to struggle." Willow hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, before I came here, before I met my husband, life was difficult. Yet here you are, mistress of all this." Mrs. Garner gestured to encompass the ranch beyond the window. "Providence has a way of turning wheels, doesn't it?" "It does indeed," Willow agreed, thinking of that desperate day 5 years ago when she'd fled her uncle's homestead. Sometimes the darkest moments lead to unexpected light. That evening, after their guests had retired and the children were asleep, Willow shared Mrs. Garner's observation with Samuel as they sat before the fire in their bedroom. "She's right," Samuel said, drawing Willow closer against his side. "Providence brought you to me, though the path was harder than it should have been." "Would you believe I'm grateful for it?" Willow asked, resting her head on his shoulder. "Not for my uncle's cruelty, but for the journey that led me here, to you, to our children, to this life we've built." Samuel pressed a kiss to her temple. "I remember the first moment I saw you in that saloon, standing tall despite everything. I knew then you were extraordinary, though I couldn't have imagined how completely you would transform my life." "We transformed each other," Willow corrected gently. "You saw value in me when I'd forgotten my own worth." "She's worth more than my entire herd," Samuel quoted his own words from that day. "The truest thing I've ever said, though I had no idea then how true it would prove to be." Willow turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, Samuel Yates. More with each passing day." "And I love you, Willow Yates," he replied, kissing her with the same tenderness that had marked their first kiss in the Marshall's garden years ago. "Worth more than all the horses and cattle in Wyoming Territory." As they settled into bed that night, Willow reflected on the extraordinary journey from that dusty road where her uncle had bound her wrists to this moment of perfect contentment. Life on the frontier would always bring challenges: harsh winters, unpredictable markets, the occasional unscrupulous neighbor, but facing those challenges with Samuel beside her made even the difficulties part of a life richly lived. In the quiet darkness, with her husband steady breathing beside her and their children sleeping peacefully down the hall, Willow offered a silent prayer of gratitude. For Samuel's intervention that fateful day, for the courage to begin again, for the family they'd created and the love that had blossomed from the most unlikely soil. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, bringing promise of green pastures and abundant crops. Inside, wrapped in the warmth of home and family, Willow Yates slept the peaceful sleep of a woman who knew her true worth not in horses or gold or land, but in the love she gave and received, in the lives she touched, in the legacy she and Samuel were building together on the Wyoming plains.